And good afternoon, Cathy. How are you today?
Excellent. And welcome to our fourth edition, I think, of the Think Like an Explorer video podcast. And what I was interested in thinking about today riffs off the back of the time of the year, which of course is ski season, clearly. We're not quite there yet, but the snow is likely to start falling this weekend in the Pyrenees, where I live.
It started falling in Scotland.
Well, yes, Scotland jumped the gun on that one. And I think the Alps is about to be buried in snow.
Oh.
You know, one of the things that happens at the beginning of a ski season, if you do a lot of off-piste, backcountry, ski touring, whatever you're calling it, is brushing up on avalanche skills.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things people don't always realize is that I think 85% of all avalanche accidents are caused by the skiers. It doesn't sort of trigger above you in some act of God and fall on your head. You set the slope off yourself and then get caught up in it as it goes down.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 2 decades worth of research and training and information about this. And yet there are fewer fatalities, but it's a long, long way from being none.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the pieces of research that started to come out in the mid-2000s as against the 1990s was, okay, the fatalities we're getting, they're all going to be beginners, right? Because our experienced, trained people aren't going to be making mistakes, clearly, which is not what the research showed at all. And the experts are still getting themselves killed. They're still making mistakes. And there was a new wave of research that started looking at the human factor. So this isn't just about saying, there's a message in from Nigel saying he's struggling to log on. So we have an explorer beating his way to our doorstep at the moment. He may or may not make his way in. The research started to look at the fact that human error and human error among experts. So what's that about? And there's a very interesting seminal piece of research. Ooh, he's coming. He's fighting his way through the tent door. Shall we cheer him on and see if we can
Just
get
carry
him?
on. Carry on, if Nigel, if you can't get in, just refresh.
Hold his way in. There's a seminal piece of research from 2004 about heuristic traps in avalanche decision making, and they identify 6. Oh, well done, Nigel.
We're here yet.
You fought your way through to join us.
We're there. Anyway, come on, let's go.
Anyway, so you got up to the 6 types.
So, as I'm saying, there's this seminal piece of research about decision-making in avalanches that identifies 6 heuristic traps. And this is what I was interested in for today. Our title is a little bit misleading because I'm not talking about big teams. We're talking about small, specialized expert teams. But there's some interesting changes when you swap from 2 to 4, and then when you go above about 6. So pairs do one set of things. Teams of sort of 2 up to about 5 do a second set of things. And they're probably the safest. And the bigger teams, where you'd think there might actually be safety in numbers and, more diversity, more ideas, more bodies on the ground, all that sort of thing. No, some interesting mistakes that slide in. Okay. And it's about the way the teams interact with each other.
Yeah.
Nigel, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Fought your way into a storm.
Been one of those days, but anyway. Looking through the research, Cathy, as you say, the way that perhaps pairs react against 4s is really amazed me what differences people will make. And also their skill levels. Again, looking at research, you would expect people that were highly skilled and highly motivated would get the decision right. And that really didn't seem to be in quite a few numbers the case.
No. I think that's fascinating because we put a lot of emphasis on expertise.
Yes.
That's a cure, and it's not. Expertise brings up a whole lot of traps. There's an interesting comment there from Nazim, communication between team members. Well, it depends what they're communicating about. Because if we look at these bigger teams, they tend to go in for two key mistakes. Actually, let's talk about expert teams. I think that applies to what Nazim and Betty were saying. Expert teams go for two key mistakes. They make more mistakes on familiar ground because they're so convinced that they know what they're doing. They fully understand the terrain they're playing in. Yeah. So beginners get into trouble in unknown terrain. Experts get into trouble in their home ground because they're so convinced they know. But coming back to the communication thing, one that they call social facilitation, a group of experts ramp each other up. So if communication is me going, Nigel, this looks amazing, fresh powder, we're the first people here. Yeah, this will go, won't it? Yeah. Nigel goes, yes, of course it will, yes. And Cindy is there like, yeah, wow, first, who's going first? We talk each other into believing that it's safe.
Yeah.
So we're communicating all right. We're sharing, excitement, and we're talking about what we're seeing, but we're already filtering it through what we want. We want to ski the untracked powder line.
Yeah. And also, I think, Cathy, a thing here is as you say, particularly when it's ground we know well, we get yes, I know what I'm doing because I'm trained. I know the area. It's been all right before, and complacency has a horrible, nasty way of creeping in because we all do it, whether it be skiing, whether it be working in business, that I've done it before. It must be fine. Yes, everything's okay. Let's just go. And we just lose that edge sometimes, which is where you need sometimes a person in a group to stand back and say, I'm not happy. But how many people faced with an expert will have the courage to stand up and say, I don't think this is right? Because you'll probably find, as you say, the more experts in the group, it'll be, well, we know what we're doing, off we go. And then, of course, disaster can happen.
Yes, two of the 6 heuristics that they identify feed into exactly that. The one is what they call acceptance, the desire to impress.
Yeah.
You're with a group of skiers who you think are pretty good, and you're really, really hoping that they're going to think you're good too. You're going to have to be one of the crew, in with the boys.
Oh, yes.
So you're not going to be the one who puts your hand up and says, look, sorry, guys, I'm scared. Or I just, this doesn't feel good. The other one they identify, they pick it up particularly with larger teams where it's, I think, harder to have an open, sort of open level discussion because there are just too many voices. Expert halo.
Yeah.
And apparently this is particularly bad with kind of intermediate level teams where people's expertise is actually fairly shaky.
Yeah.
But the guy who just talks loudest or talks with the most confidence or tells the best war stories or he's just the one who's pushed off in front because he's uber keen and the rest of you are trailing to keep up with him. All of those things position someone as a leader.
Yeah.
And then you start to go, well, he looks like he knows what he's doing. So, yeah, cool, let's go.
And I've seen it myself, Cathy. I mean, I know guides I've worked with in the Arctic before who are just really super cautious. And they'll say, we went over these tracks yesterday. And so what? There's been snow overnight. There's been wind overnight. We will completely reassess the situation by the hour or even the minute. Not we came yesterday. But I think there's an old phrase which is well known in my world, which is a little information is very, very dangerous. And there are people that have some training. They may not be, super well trained, but they've had some ideas. They've been on a couple of courses. They've done some things. And it's that first step. Right, well, this is my first experience. I've got to sort of make a decision here. There's 3 guys behind me who are itching to go, and they're looking at me. We're going to go. And there is that huge pressure, particularly, I think, when people, we're using skiing here, but when people have perhaps paid to go on a trip, they've perhaps, we want to go do this, and some people feel pressured to do it, and they're not massively experienced. The push is to go. And you've really got to be able to stand up hard to folk and say, you might think that looks safe. I've assessed it. I am not happy. We're going somewhere else. And then answer the questions afterwards. It's no good answering them under an avalanche.
Well, but what is actually interesting about this particular context, which is very high risk compared to what most small teams are working on, is that our feedback is terribly one-sided. As in, if we get caught in an avalanche, clearly we got it wrong.
Yeah.
The rest of the time we don't get caught in an avalanche, we assume we got it right.
Yeah.
We may just have got it lucky. So we're constantly getting feedback that makes us think that we're building our levels of expertise. All those times we haven't been avalanched. Whereas in fact we may just be wandering around with a blindfold on, making completely stupid choices.
Yeah.
And have just got away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As you say, the feedback is yes or no. It's a binary feedback. Rather than, as you say, you could set off, or be, within a percent of setting off an avalanche every 3 or 4 times on the hill. But unless it goes, you have a lovely day, the sun shines, and everybody comes home and has some great stories to tell. And there is no, you were 68% in, or 90% in, or 94% likely. There is just A or B. Unfortunately, one is really good, and the other one is quite fatal.
I see we've had a good question come in. From Kasaseshi. Since you're putting your life on the line, what about the emotional state of mind of guides or members?
Great question.
And I think this is absolutely crucial, because a whole lot of things can affect what we're doing. We're attempting to make the clients happy. We're attempting to prove our status as a good guide.
Yeah.
Or in flat management teams, because plenty of teams are not guide client teams. We're attempting to show we're one of the boys. We're attempting to show we're good enough to ski with the crew.
Yeah.
If you're a woman, but possibly you're attempting to look like you're as good as the men you're skiing with. If you're a man, possibly you're attempting to impress the woman in the group. That actually comes up in the research.
It does indeed. Yeah.
Women, particularly intermediate level groups, result in the men making even more.
It was hilarious reading there. I absolutely but I've seen it happen. I've worked with military groups on trips, and there is really this big thing of we've got to look like men, we've got to be really strong and broad-shouldered, and look at us, we're fantastic. And of course, sometimes you get away with it, and of course they keep getting away with it and go back to where we were. But that mixed sex in the group, I was amazed what that research brought out. But when you think back at it, it's absolutely wrong.
Hang on, there's a really interesting comment here from Saket954. I think responsibility increases on each member in a small team than a bigger one.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's actually, no, I don't agree at all. No. I think that's a classic heuristic trap, because now it's somebody else's problem. The team is big enough that someone else is the leader. Yeah. And the rest of us can stand around like sheep and, make lame jokes and wait for somebody else. And whatever the size of the team, if you've got expertise or opinions or concerns, you have to speak up. And I mean, this is actually the whole point about our title, that bigger teams can make worse decisions. And this is one of the reasons. Yeah. Bigger teams, you assume that if you're the only one who seems to have a worry, you must be wrong because the numbers are against you.
Yeah.
99% all appear to be fine. Of course, if they're all doing the same thing you're doing, which is being secretly worried while keeping a game face on to the rest of the team, you've actually got no way of judging who's worried in this situation.
And I think, if let's say it was you and me on a mountain or whatever we're doing, Cathy, we know each other, we've known each other for some time, so we wouldn't mind having the conversation of, well, what do you think of this? Have we looked at the aspect? What's the weather like? Are we going to dig an avalanche pit? Are we going to have a look at snow, etc., etc.? If you're in a team of people you might not know, and you don't know each other well, the classic guide and 3 clients, some people are going to sit at the back, as you say. They're just going to go, well, you said it was okay, because we're into blames. You said it was okay, and it was a disaster. It must be your fault. So nobody wants the finger pointing.
But also, I think nobody wants to be the one who's not tough enough.
Yeah.
So my experience isn't with guides and clients. My experience is with teams where everybody are equal effectively, and you're running your team decision-making on some kind of consensus. If there are 2 of you it's easy. We're 50-50. I can turn to you and say, look, this just doesn't feel right to me.
Mm.
If I'm one of 5, and 80% of them are looking like this is a brilliant idea, and I'm the one who's going to say, well, sorry, I'm not up for this. I'm scared. I'm worried. I'm, the worry-wart over cautious person who's going to kill the fun for the rest of the group. It comes with a whole lot of emotional baggage to be the voice of caution.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big challenges for any team, high-risk teams, is how are you going to make a space where it is safe for people to dissent?
Yeah.
And safe, particularly if you're in any industry that pushes forward, it's very results-focused. Make it safe for people to say, this is a mistake in the bigger picture. I mean, I had a really interesting conversation once just after the banking crisis with a guy who ran risk in one of the big Swiss banks. And he said, it wasn't that they didn't have a risk department. It wasn't as if they didn't have every one of those risky trades assessed. But it was made very clear to him that results of the overall bank rested on them doing lots of these trades. And nobody wanted him to be the squeaky wheel. Nobody wanted him to be the pool that was stopping the river from running fast and free. And although his job description said one thing, the message that he was given said something very different. They hadn't created a safe space for him to do his job in.
It's an issue I've seen in industry, and it does something that worries me, because there are industries that have to take more risk than others if they're to succeed. And as you say, nobody wants to be that person that, well, we did this great thing and that person cocked it up. That's what they'll say. It's not a cock up. It actually is. This person's probably saved your bacon. And this person should not be ostracized for that. But it doesn't work well in terms of business at times, because they say they all clamour. Lots of businesses I know will clamour to be number 1 in their rankings, whatever those rankings are. And what they'll be saying is, well, if we didn't take the risk, somebody else would. And that somebody else might now be number 1. Of course, the issue is somebody else might take that risk and everybody thinks, what a fantastic job. But when it goes wrong, you fall to the bottom of the pile very, very quickly. And it is not an easy ladder to climb again. I've seen it with football teams. I've seen it in industry. We're all about getting that % down of possible risk. But somewhere, it's going to go wrong on you. Are you prepared to accept that? Because if you're not in the right game.
Well, I do think one thing that might help, one of the heuristics they come up with, again, that affects larger teams, is what they call inconsistency. As in, you set a plan up at the beginning of the day, and you're then very invested in achieving the plan.
Yeah.
And it's easier to stick with the plan than do the constant reassessment thing that you were talking about earlier. And then you've got a bunch of goal-focused people. If we're talking mountaineering, it's all about reaching the top of whatever it is, or at least that's one of the myths of the game.
Yeah.
It's all about conquering the top, when actually a great deal of it's about is having fun on the way.
Absolutely.
But I think you can set things up in advance, as in, what is your ultimate goal? So if your ultimate goal is just objective X, summit X, or powder slope Y, and then people will refuse to change their mind, even though the signs are ramping up that this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
But if you have a slightly bigger goal, which is that our goal is to go out and have fun, challenge ourselves, and come home in one piece. Our goal is not just to climb this mountain, but to climb mountains 5 years from now and climb mountains 20 years from now.
Yeah.
You go in with a different approach.
Yeah,
and then you can have a fluid plan, because the plan is to enjoy, to learn, to survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's easier to say, it's not going to be this cold weather this day. It's not going to be this mountain.
Yeah.
I think business is making that hard, because we've become so focused on short-term results, quarter-over-quarter profits. Yeah. Did your stock price rise, week by week? A ridiculous demand for endless upward performance. And I think that really does play against this idea of bigger goals and longer-term thinking.
I think there's another thing is something I've seen as well, is when we start pitching people against each other. and we pitch, say, 4 or 5 managers, and we'll say, right, there's one bonus this year, and it's going to go to one of you, and there's 5 of you fighting over it. If it was the same with skiing, you get the best routes for my clients, and I will pay you the big money. And the temptation is too much for some people, and they will almost crawl over others to achieve that. But if that puts them at huge risk, some people will be prepared to accept it. Now, at times it's with only them, and that's up to their choice. But when you're taking other people with you, then it's a very, very different matter. And you might ski out on that face. And we all know that more avalanches happen on the lower angled slopes. It's not on big vertical stuff. It looks okay. When you're 100 meters out in it, it's too late. You've taken the choice, and you are in the middle of something horrifically dangerous. And if you've taken that decision with other people, then it's going to go one way or the other. And you may not have a choice in that, because lots of avalanches are set off, as we know, by other people. Forget this thing about somebody shouting. They're set off a lot of the time by human intervention. They could be out on there and one person goes and the whole lot of you are down. And it's too late then. You've taken that choice. You've exposed yourself so much, you have no return path.
I think we live in a world that sends out very mixed messages, because there are a great many messages saying, winners never quit, go for it. The guy who takes the biggest risk wins. Yeah. Our heroes are the people of these startups who live the job 24/7 and, committed everything to make it happen. And yet people do things where big risk ends up in big failure, and instantly it's a blame culture. How stupid were they? They should have known better. They were ego-seeking, egotistical glory hunters. And you can't really have both things.
No.
We somehow want this amazing cutting-edge success while assuming that there's some way of doing it where no risk is involved at all.
Yeah. There's an old phrase you all know in mountaineering, Cathy. There are old mountaineers and there are bold mountaineers, but there are very few old and bold mountaineers, because you can only get away with certain things for so long. You can only push, people say you can push the envelope. You can only push it for so long until that thing goes pop, and it will catch you. It's happened to so many people that you think are so experienced. I mean, we've had awful tragedies only in Scotland before on slopes that people go up and down day in, day out with guides, and then one day it's just got them. And people ask all the questions, what were they doing there? Why were they there? What was going on? And like with so many things in life, it's really easy to ask the question afterwards. Why don't you ask it before? Why don't you do the questioning and get the suggested outcome, what could or could not be, before you even put a foot on that slope? And I think that's really good what you were talking about earlier about, let's go on a trip and we're going to climb some mountains. I don't know which one, and I don't know on what day, because I don't know what the conditions are like, but we're going to have fun doing it. And I think that is vital.
Yeah, I think there are a set of tools that potentially go into making this. There's a comment that came up in the my audience about it's difficult working with bigger teams, directing and motivating. I think that's true. And I think in our case, we would say ideal team sizes are probably maximum 6.
Yeah.
4 to 6 works really well in the mountains. And in bigger business, my feeling would be try and break bigger teams down into smaller subgroups.
Yes.
So that they are small enough that you have this good communication, good interaction between the different members. People don't feel they were lost in the back of the crowd and therefore are no longer responsible for helping with decisions, making comments, pointing out problems.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree, Cathy, because, you take it away from the mountain, let's go into business. You can have a department of people, 30, 40, 50, 60 people. You may have different experiences in different disciplines. You all bring those experiences to the table. And it's very hard to make decisions with such a large group of people. It could be, right, I need 6 people to go and do a project and look into this, 6 people to go and look at that, 4 people to go and look at that. See what you find, report back to me, and then we can start looking at what it is. Because 30 or 40 people, you're wasting your time. Nobody's focused, nobody's targeted, and it gives the ability for people to sit in the background and do nothing. It gives the ability for other people to get and do all the work. And it's just not good at all for people in a group. Small, targeted groups work well.
Absolutely. And I think we're closing in on our time. So just to share some of the conclusions that came out of this research about what you can then do with small targeted groups to make them as good as they can possibly be. Part of it clearly is expert training.
Yeah.
On the whole, people do better once everybody has been properly trained. The second point then seems to be that training has to be redone.
Yes.
Even experts slide back into their old shortcut behaviors, particularly when in something like skiing, you don't actually get feedback. You don't know whether it's good judgment or good luck that's kept you safe. Mm-hmm. So experts need to retrain. And I don't know about you, Nigel, but yeah, we redo the medical stuff every couple of years. Yeah. We do avalanche training courses every year or second year. We do crevasse rescue courses to keep that top of mind.
Yeah.
And then I think it really is worth remembering that it's not just about how you use the avalanche transceiver or your digging technique or your probing technique or your first aid. It's reading the stuff around heuristics and thinking about what does that mean to me? Which ones do I think I'm prone to? The groups that I travel with, what do I see? What's the dynamic within those people? Because if we can start to recognize these human dynamics that derail good decision-making, then we're some way along the line towards deflecting it and keeping our judgment as good as it can possibly be.
Yeah. And you might be trained to retrain because things change. New equipment comes out, new techniques come out, new research comes out. But the other thing is, training is excellent, but you've also got to be in the field. It's no good doing a first aid course once every 3 years, but you never get involved with anything in between, or being, I don't know, crevasse rescue, but never going and trying it out, never putting yourself into the environment, because the environment move, we change, the way people work changes, and we've got to keep ourselves on that cutting edge at the front if we are to make anything like the right decisions.
Well, on that note, Nigel, clearly you've just advocated that we should dump the office work and go skiing.
Absolutely, let's go skiing. Come on, let's go.
It's time to go and put our training into practice and test ourselves on the slopes. So, thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to see some chat about my book happening on the side there, and I'm sorry it's not in Italian. You can find me an Italian publisher. I'd be very happy, but you'll have to stick with it in English. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's been great to have you, and we hope to be back in 2 weeks' time with our next episode.
See you then.
Bye.